This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Hello and welcome to Invisible Hate. I am Saadia Khan.
And I'm Asad.
On the evening of January 29th, 2019, in Streeterville, a dark and high-density neighborhood in Chicago, actor Jussie Smollett is walking home. He's talking to his former music manager, Brandon Moore, on the phone. In the background of the call, Moore hears someone utter an anti-gay slur, then a reply from Smollett. He hears a fight ensue. The phone is knocked down but remains on. Smollett is then beat up by two men in ski masks. The men yell, "This is MAGA country," and pour something on him while putting a noose around his neck. Then the perpetrators flee. Smollett retrieves his cell phone and tells Moore he's just been jumped. He reports the hate crime to the Chicago police, who come to his apartment to take a statement. Then he goes to the hospital. He's treated for cuts to his face, marks on his neck, and rib pain. Major injuries are ruled out, and he is said to be in good condition. The next day, police release grainy surveillance video of the perpetrators fleeing the scene, and Chicago police begin a painstaking investigation. Yet, 1 month later, it's Smollett who's arrested. This is Invisible Hate. Welcome back to Invisible Hate, a weekly true crime podcast in which Asad and I attempt to uncover the ugly truths behind various hate crimes, both recent and historical.
Yeah, that's right, Saadia. As our regular listeners will know, many of the cases that we discuss involve crimes committed against minority groups. Our goal is to determine through a discussion of the nuances and complexities of these crimes whether or not they should be considered hate crimes. Before we get started on today's case, Saadia, how are you doing? How was your week?
I'm doing good, Asad. I was just in a recording for Immigrantly, and it was a fun interview about gaming.
Are you a gamer?
I'm not a gamer, so I wasn't really sure how I would conduct this interview, but it went really well. It's mostly about Call of Duty, so any gamers out there, do check it out. It'll come out on May 7th.
Sounds interesting.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Can't complain. You know what I've started doing? So, Isha just turned 1 recently, about a month ago.
Oh, happy birthday, Isha.
Oh, thank you. I got her a little bike seat for my bike.
Oh, wow.
She likes to go in the stroller and kind of go fast. But the problem is that she doesn't like the helmet. As soon as you put the helmet on, she starts wailing. I don't know what it is about the helmet, like having something on her head and locked up. But yeah, it's really cute. I'll send you some pictures of Isha on the bike. Once she's on the bike, she generally does okay, though I think she's still trying to get used to it. So yeah, that's been the fun spring activity over here.
I can hear it in your voice, Asad. It must be a lot of fun. And yes, Isha, you need to wear a helmet. Yeah. It's important.
Yeah, totally. Should we get back to today's case?
Yes. So for those that don't know, Jussie Smollett is a 37-year-old African-American man and is also gay and of Jewish ancestry, a minority in many ways and also a celebrity. He's a musician and actor on the hip-hop TV drama Empire, where he plays Jamal, a singer-songwriter. The show is filmed in Chicago and is the winner of 2 Golden Globe Awards and 2 NAACP Image Awards. Smollett comes from a family of actors and activists. That January evening, Chicago police arrive at Smollett's apartment 40 minutes after the attack. He still has the rope draped around his neck. Now, Asad, this is a bit suspicious to me. Why would he have rope draped around after 40 minutes?
You'd expect that he would take it right off, right?
He would, yeah. Anyways, he recounts the events and is able to identify at least one of the perpetrators as a white man. Authorities are suspicious of Smollett right out of the gate. I don't know why, maybe because he has this rope draped around his neck, but yeah, they are suspicious. Given Smollett's high profile, the nature of the crime, and the tumultuous political climate, police and FBI engage in a large manhunt. Authorities canvass the neighborhood, then expand their search and review hundreds of hours of surveillance. While the attack itself is not caught on camera, investigators quickly obtain footage of the suspects leaving the scene. From there, they track down further footage from around 55 residential and business cameras capturing the suspects' movements before and after the crime. Meanwhile, there's an outcry of support for Smollett in the wake of this hate crime from citizens and fellow celebrities alike. Empire's network, Fox, states, and I quote, "We are deeply saddened and outraged to learn that a member of our Empire family, Jussie Smollett, was viciously attacked last night. We send our love to Jussie, who is resilient and strong, and we'll work with law enforcement to bring these perpetrators to justice. The entire studio, network, and production stands united in the face of any despicable act of violence and hate, and especially against one of our own," unquote. So everybody's on board. Everyone is supporting him. GLAAD reaches out to offer support, saying, and I quote, "Jussie is a true champion for LGBTQ plus people and is beloved by the community and allies around the world," unquote.
Yeah, Saadia, I think this is the right reaction, right? When you have someone in your community that's been victimized like this, you want to stand with them and believe them, right? And I think GLAAD and Fox and his colleagues, I think, they're doing and saying all the right things based on what he says happened.
Absolutely, Asad. I am so glad that the community came together for him. And as expected, even news outlets set up interviews of the shaken and angry actor, who makes it known that he really fought back. Here's a clip of him talking to CNN.
"I think that what people need to hear is just the truth. I will never be the man that this did not happen to. I am forever changed. And I don't subscribe to the idea that everything happens for a reason, but I do subscribe to the idea that we have the right and the responsibility to make something meaningful out of the things that happen to us, good and bad."
Eventually, police acquired footage of the suspects entering a cab after the assault, and then footage from inside that cab of their faces. I said, I'm really surprised. Footage from inside the cab, so cabs have cameras.
Yeah, Sally, I think more and more you're finding that, certainly Uber drivers and cab drivers are placing cameras, inside. I don't know if this was a regulation thing in Chicago where he was. I recommend it based on all the footage that I've seen of crazy people getting into cabs and doing stuff. And so I'm not surprised. There are cameras everywhere now, Sally, as you know.
Yeah, so any passengers, just remember there are cameras.
Yeah, these are public places.
These are public places, right? Anyways, about a month into the investigation, police name Abimbola and Olambinjo Osandro persons of interest and arrest them. They are two black Nigerian brothers who happened to be extras on Empire. The plot thickens, Asad.
Yeah, Saadia, what a twist, because didn't he name that it was a white guy that did it?
Exactly.
And so this is an interesting twist that two people that presumably he knows that were extras on the set and two black Nigerian brothers are arrested. Very interesting. And I can't wait for you to share more. But first, we're going to take a break, and we'll come back right after this.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Welcome back to Invisible Hate. So, Saadia, they likely knew each other, right? I'm guessing. Is there strong evidence against these two brothers, the Osundaros?
Yes, Asad. One of the brothers is his personal trainer, friend, and ecstasy dealer.
Interesting. Drugs,
right. Now, police have footage of the brothers on video buying masks and other supplies used in the attack. They are on camera taking an Uber to Smollett's neighborhood on the day of the attack and then exiting a taxi within blocks of the crime scene shortly beforehand.
Wow, cameras everywhere, Saadia. Really, there really are.
I'm telling you, Asad, cameras everywhere. And to dissuade anyone from thinking they had merely stalked Smollett enough to know his whereabouts, phone records show that Smollett and one of the brothers spoke briefly just over an hour before the attack.
Interesting.
They also spoke the following day as the Osundaros were heading out on a trip overseas.
Oh, that's interesting. Potentially what's happening is like they got into a fight, like over the phone or in person, and then, they speak briefly on the phone. There's maybe some sort of like, hey, what's going on, and then the brothers go after Smollett, right? I think that's what maybe police are thinking. That's what Smollett is arguing. But the fact that they spoke the next day, that is surprising, questionable, right?
That raises some red flags for me, Asad.
Totally, yeah, agreed. And that they're heading overseas, which implies that maybe they know they're about to get in trouble, and they need to get away.
Exactly. Now, Smollett is reticent to surrender his phone, reminding police that he is the victim. He also says he didn't recognize the brothers during the attack. Now, if I were attacked, Asad, I would give police my phone and I would be like, just take it, find the perpetrators. I don't care. But he doesn't want to. So he is hesitant, right?
Yeah, I think generally I would not want to give my phone over to the police. I wouldn't without some sort of warrant or without some sort of, I would definitely, help them. But like, I don't know. I don't trust the police.
That's a good point.
Even if I was a victim, like that's not where my head is at right now in terms of trust in law enforcement.
Especially as two Muslims, Asad, we shouldn't.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Anyways, apparently they were heading out on an overseas trip, but somehow police intercepts, they find them, and initially brothers stay rather mum until authorities tell them that they are about to be charged with a hate crime.
Whoa, yeah.
And that's when they tell the police that the attack was, get this, staged.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
They say Smollett paid them $3,500 to buy supplies and assault him at a predetermined location near his apartment and in front of a police security camera. They say he scripted the attack and called them on the phone that evening to tell them exactly when it should take place. His motive apparently was to garner attention to further his career. He was also upset with the Fox studio over his salary and their reaction to him receiving a piece of hate mail at work, which, by the way, prosecutors later alleged was fabricated by him.
Something's not right. Yep.
Yeah, there's a pattern, Asad. So the brothers, for their part, said they thought Smollett would help them advance their own careers afterward. They said he was responsible for the hate mail that arrived a week before the attack.
Wow, this is so fascinating. Saadia, I knew enough about this case that, just generally that this happened, that he, had faked it, but these details are really interesting to me. Like, I didn't know any of this stuff before you just said, like, the fact that it looks like he wrote a hate mail to himself at work and that it was all about advancing his career. And I think for me, what's interesting is that, like, it doesn't seem very well thought out, right? Like it seems like this is something that they put together like that night and we're like, oh, let's just do this tonight. And like, as we said, cameras are everywhere and like, they're not great criminals.
Yeah. So, I mean, he is an actor. So he was acting in his role, right?
Yeah, that's true. So, Saadia, for the brothers who are, I guess, involved in this and the ones that beat up Jussie, were there any legal repercussions for them?
Asad, what's interesting is the brothers admit to the crime and they are not convicted of anything because it wasn't a hate crime, right?
Right.
They were likely offered immunity as cooperating witnesses as well. But everybody's reputation is rather tarnished in court, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shortly after the arrest of the brothers, Smollett is charged with 1 count of disorderly conduct for lying to authorities. However, a judge increases the charges to a 16-count indictment. Come springtime, the Cook County State's Attorney, Kim Fox, wipes the indictment against him in exchange for Smollett forfeiting his $10,000 bond and community service. So basically, in exchange for community service, his charges were wiped. His indictment was wiped.
Right.
He does not have to admit to any wrongdoing. Fox cites Smollett's past service to his community as a factor and also says her office is focused on actual violent offenses. That makes sense to me. Many people are up in arms though. The city files a civil lawsuit demanding that he cover the cost of the investigation.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. What's interesting is, Asad, that just 2 months after the charges are dismissed, likely facing public scrutiny, a special prosecutor is assigned to the case. So the case doesn't close there.
Yeah, because I think this was like in the headlines across the country. This was a major discussion on conservative media and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, I can imagine that there was just so much interest in this case.
You're right, Asad. I mean, in this case, his celebrity status became a curse for him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, in conjunction with a grand jury, the special prosecutor conducts an independent investigation pro bono. Like, this is a big deal, right?
Yeah, totally.
The prosecutor is really committed. He recommends recharging Smollett, and the next February, the grand jury votes for a 6-count indictment.
Interesting.
The charges are for felony disorderly conduct, specifically for 5 separate times. He allegedly lied to the police right after the attack and once more 1 month into investigation. So basically, it's the number of times he lied.
Yeah, right.
Smollett pleads not guilty. His lawyers repeatedly claim that other leads weren't pursued by investigators, including 2 witnesses who saw a suspicious white man the evening of the attack.
So his lawyers are still claiming that he wasn't involved. They're still claiming that there was someone else that attacked him that night.
Yeah, Asad, and I kept thinking maybe he staged a hate crime, right?
Yeah.
And then he was actually hate crimed by some white dude. Who knows,
interesting.
Right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
I mean, that's my conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's true, but yet they also claim that the brothers orchestrated the assault because they are homophobic and wanted Smollett to give them $1 million each not to testify, which again is conflicting if claiming this wasn't staged, right?
Yeah, totally.
But brothers testify at the trial, saying Smollett gave them money for ski masks, MAGA hats, and rope. Told them to put a noose around his neck and poured bleach on him, and paid them for the act.
Wow.
I mean, who would want bleach poured on them?
I know, yeah. I mean, like, for someone who is already a celebrity to think that this is the way to increase their notoriety and their public profile, it's it's really shocking to me. But I also, understand it in the influencer age that we live in. You see this kind of stuff on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok all the time of people doing just like outrageous things. Obviously here it was done for claiming that he was the victim. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that we don't know if this is true, Asad, right?
Yeah, sure.
I get the news part maybe because obviously it was around his neck when police found him, but pouring bleach, I don't know. Prosecutors claim he also told them exactly what to shout. Smollett takes the stand and denies any hoax. He claims the brothers are lying and that the money he gave them was a fee for workout plans and meals. Remember, one of them was his personal trainer, right?
Yep.
His publicist testifies saying Smollett's career was skyrocketing then and there was no way he would have done anything to damage his face and thus career. And this makes sense to me, Asad. Like, this case is so confusing and so conflicting. But what do you think?
Yeah, I guess my media informed perception of what this case was, but going into this, and now as you're talking, even in the last couple of minutes, I'm questioning how I feel about it. I think I came into this knowing or thinking that he staged it and that he was part of the problem. But as you're talking right now, yeah, that makes sense. Like, why would he try to damage his face, or like his claims make sense? I don't know what to think of it right now, Saadia, honestly.
I am with you, Asad. I am with you there. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, entertainers and activist friends speak to news crews about Smollett's outstanding character. His media team organizes the speeches and says the Chicago Police Department ruined his career with their, and I quote, character assassination and disinformation campaign. Come December, the trial ends. Smollett is found guilty of 5 of the 6 counts.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So disorderly conduct is a class 4 felony that carries a maximum prison sentence of 3 years per count.
Wow. So he could have been going away for 15 years. Wow.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay.
Legal analysts predict he'll be placed on probation instead and won't face perjury charges since he was convicted. His lawyers react by again saying police did a shoddy job investigating and that Smollett was tried in the media before he even arrived at court.
Interesting.
And I should mention here, I said that while the police investigation was short, 23 days, it did seem thorough.
Okay.
Now, again, I mean, some of the stuff that was said and done doesn't seem, I don't know, realistic to me, but at least they were thorough in their investigation. Let's also recognize that it potentially detracted from real hate crimes, right? Dozens of shootings and at least 18 murders that occurred in Chicago in the same time frame. And this is the most problematic part of this, Asad, because we've covered so many hate crime cases on our podcast. This whole hoax thing really casts a shadow of doubt on real hate crimes. And that's a huge deal for me. When I think of it, I feel like he did a huge disservice to minorities by staging a hate crime.
Yeah, I think that's right. And to your point, also just detracting from all the other violence that was happening, in the city at that time, right? And even across the nation, I 100% agree.
As a side note, his lawyers note the oddity of being charged for 5, but not 6 counts, since they are all stemming from the same incident. So we don't know what the significance of 5 is, but that's what he gets.
Saadia, this is all really fascinating stuff. Let's take another quick break and we'll come back. I want to hear more about the public reaction to his conviction and what happened at his sentencing. This is Invisible Hate. Welcome back to Invisible Hate. So Saadia, tell me about how the public reacted to his sentencing.
So before sentencing, the NAACP president, Rainbow Push Coalition, and various actors send letters of support and requests to keep him out of jail. So everybody is supporting him for both his safety and career. Nonetheless, the judge sentences Smollett to 30 months of felony probation with 150 days served in Cook County Jail, plus more than $120,000 in restitution to the city of Chicago and a $25,000 fine. He calls Smollett a charlatan and says significant premeditation, perjury, and damage to real hate crime victims were factors in the sentencing. Once the judge has announced the term, Smollett jumps up and screams that he's innocent, saying, and I quote, "If I did this, then it means that I stuck my fist in the fears of Black Americans in this country for over 400 years and the fears of the LGBTQ plus community." Unquote. He also insinuates that he might be killed in jail due to his high profile, and that if anything happens to him, it's not a suicide.
Wow.
The judge, on the other hand, tells him, and I quote, "The damage you've done to yourself is way beyond anything else that can happen to you from me. You are now a permanently convicted felon." Unquote.
Wow.
I mean, the judge is being really harsh, Asad.
Yeah, sure.
And the judge also says something that we want to share here. Take a listen.
Of a hate crime. It is the worst thing that can happen, especially in our country with all our history and all that we're going through now to try to get around some of these issues. Hate crimes are the absolute worst. And I believe that you did damage to real hate crimes, to hate crime victims. There are people that are actual, genuine victims of hate crimes that you did damage to.
Smollett's attorney immediately appeals both the verdict and the judge's sentence. He argues that Smollett was essentially charged and punished for the same crime twice, or double jeopardy, since the state's attorney had initially dismissed the charges.
Oh, that's interesting.
That is interesting, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. This idea is that you can't be charged by the state for the same crime twice. So if they charged me with murder and I got away with it, they couldn't charge me, 10 years later for the same crime. And so that's interesting that they brought this up. So yeah, what happened?
Prosecutors, on the other hand, argue that the bond paid and community service done in exchange for the state's attorney wiping the first indictment was agreed to voluntarily and therefore do not constitute punishment. I don't understand this, Asad. Can you explain?
Yeah, this seems to me like it's the equivalent of like not getting it in contract form. Essentially, like I think they're arguing that he just agreed to hand over the bond and do the community service. It wasn't for anything. That's what I'm reading into this, but which seems just very odd.
Yeah, so any lawyers out there, if you have any thoughts, you can write to us and explain what it really means. The state's attorney, Fox, says she believes Smollett, and I quote, was indicted, tried, and convicted by a kangaroo prosecution in a matter of months, unquote.
Yeah. What's a kangaroo prosecution for those that don't know?
So a kangaroo court is characterized by irresponsible, unauthorized, or irregular status or procedures.
Yeah.
A mere 6 days after the sentencing, Smollett is released from jail after an appeals court grants a stay pending the appeal of his conviction. He signs a personal recognizance bond of $150,000, which apparently doesn't actually require any money to be paid. Recognizance is just a promise. For those who don't know, it's just the defendant's promise that they'll appear in court again.
Yeah.
In turn, the prosecution points out that his jail sentence, 150 days, would be well over by the time the appeals process is complete. The defense again cites potential danger to Smollett in jail. Meanwhile, Fox Nation releases a 5-part docuseries called Jussie Smollett: Anatomy of a Hoax, which features the brothers that attacked him. Take a listen to a clip from that docuseries.
And then I threw him to the ground. He wanted it to look like he fought back. That was very important for him because he said, hey, don't just beat my ass, make it look like I'm fighting back and whatnot. So we did that, and then I threw him to the ground.
The brothers end up suing Smollett's lawyers for defamation. In 2022, a judge rules that the case can go forward. The lawyers in turn file a countersuit against the brothers for malicious prosecution.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
A lot of stuff is happening.
Yeah, so much. Yeah, I didn't know any of this.
So can you simplify it for our listeners who may not be able to follow this anymore?
I mean, I think the long and short of it is, he was attacked. He claims that it was a hate crime. The city and the state don't agree and prosecute him for it. He's convicted. And then basically everybody involved is now lawyering up and trying to get their take from someone involved, right? And so, the brothers that were involved in beating him up are claiming that his lawyers defamed him. Meanwhile, the lawyers are suing them for all sorts of, it's wild,
Absolutely right, Asad. Almost 2 years after Smollett's sentencing in December 2023, an Illinois appeals court upholds the conviction in a 2-1 vote, meaning Smollett will likely serve his jail term unless the Illinois Supreme Court grants a successful appeal quickly. So the case is already in Supreme Court now, right?
Yep.
The opinion states that Smollett never entered into a non-prosecution agreement with the state's attorney's office, and therefore the trial was just. So basically, you have to enter into some non-prosecution agreement?
Yeah, like what I was saying before, it just seems like, it was like they just didn't have the right contract in place, which seems ludicrous to me. But yeah.
And for listeners, if you're confused, I am too. There's a lot of legal jargon involved. But because the original charges were something called null prost, meaning abandoned, this wasn't double jeopardy.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The lone dissenting judge, however, found it fundamentally unfair that a special prosecutor was appointed after Smollett did community service.
Yeah.
What's clear is the deal that State Attorney Fox made was somehow quite controversial. Just this past February, Smollett's lawyer approached the Illinois Supreme Court to review the affirmed conviction. The special prosecutor's office again cites the lack of non-prosecution agreement and claims that Illinois law wasn't followed. New arguments that were not broached in the trial court or appellate court are raised, which is not allowed. Again, a lot of legal jargon, a lot of back and forth. Nonetheless, in March 2024, the Illinois Supreme Court does agree to take on the case. So the case right now is in the Supreme Court, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But we want to talk a little bit about the question of the day, which is...
Yeah, was it a hate crime, Saadia? What do you think?
I said, oh my gosh, I don't know.
There's a lot going on here.
Look, I can see that it was probably staged. Maybe he wanted some fame. Maybe he wanted some sympathy. We don't know what was going on in his career at the time. But we also should recognize that he has no violent or criminal past record, did not take a plea, still is fighting to prove innocence, and is a successful actor. So who knows, maybe he staged it and it really happened to him by a white man. I mean, I am confused. I am as confused as our listeners and you, Asad.
I think I lean more likely that he did have a hand in staging it. But I think regardless, the state really messed up with this. Like I all the stuff about him doing community service and then getting, charged again afterwards, I think to me is a disservice, is unjust. I think that he did give up his money and do community service for what he did. So I for me, I do think this, he got charged twice for the same crime. And I think that really is an interesting takeaway from this whole story that I didn't know.
You're absolutely right, Asad. And then redirecting states' resources to this while there are actual hate crimes happening, it's mind-boggling to me, right? It's like they are hell-bent on punishing him for some reason.
Totally, yeah. So, Saadia, what's the latest with him and with everything?
So his career certainly declined after the incident and he was cut from Empire's final season. That said, in 2022 and 2023, he released 3 singles, including a song about the charges. Profits from the songs go to the Innocence Project, Rainbow Push Coalition, and Secure the Back Safety. He also makes his directorial debut in 2023 with B-Boy Blues and is working on the next film, The Last Holiday. Smollett has, by the way, maintained his innocence all along and will face the Illinois Supreme Court to make his final case. No date is yet set for hearing arguments.
Oh, what an interesting case, Saadia. I came into it with a certain set of opinions, and this really kind of changed my mind about it and about him. And so I think I'm probably more unsure as to what actually happened, which, goes to the media's influence on all of us, right? Like, and again, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to this case. I don't think I ever really read articles directly about it, but it was so infused in media coverage that you saw headlines and, you make all these assumptions as to what happened. And clearly once you dive in, it's a lot more complicated than what the headlines and the stories at the time, portray it to be. So I'm actually interested to learn more, and we'll definitely, bring updates to our listeners as this progresses.
And listeners, if you have any information or thoughts, please do share with us. Once again, thank you so much for listening to Invisible Hate. If you want to learn more, check out links in the show notes about this case. Please do email us your thoughts on this particular story, because I'm really curious to know what you guys are thinking, or any other story that you think we should cover. You can reach us at info@invisiblehatepodcast.com. You can also tweet us or hit us up on Instagram. Just search for Invisible Hate Podcast.
Thanks again for listening. If you like what you hear, please share it with a friend. Invisible Hate is a joint production of Rafaelion Media and Immigrantly. We'd like to thank our team, which includes Lindsay Gamble, Michaela Strather, Emmanuel Monahan, and Paroma Chakravarthi. Our music was done by Simon Hutchinson. We'll be back next week with another hate crime for us to analyze. Until then, I'm Asad Butt.
And I'm Saadia Khan.